The sirens hadn't even faded when she started yelling, pointing at me like I was some criminal caught red-handed. Her son stood beside her, arms crossed, smirking, holding my grocery bags like they were his. "That's him!" she screamed. "He attacked my boy and tried to steal those!" I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just looked at the officer as he stepped out of the cruiser, one hand resting on his belt, the other already brushing his radio. The neighbors had come out, too. Some recording, some just watching, none knowing the full story. To them, I probably looked like the bad guy. I was alone, outnumbered, and falsely accused in broad daylight. But what Karen didn't know, what no one knew, was that this wasn't going to end the way she thought. Because I wasn't just some random guy with groceries. I was the one in charge of the entire precinct. It had been a long shift at the precinct. My feet ached from standing, my voice was tired from giving orders, and my mind craved just a few minutes of silence. I wasn't in uniform, just wearing a plain hoodie and jeans, blending in like any other local. I decided to stop by the neighborhood grocery store on my way home. Nothing fancy, just a quick errand to grab some essentials. The store was quiet, nestled in one of those overly manicured suburban neighborhoods with neat sidewalks, identical, mailboxes, and an HOA board that treated their little patch of land like a kingdom. I'd only recently moved into the area, and while most people seemed polite enough, there was always that lingering tension, the kind you feel in places where you're not expected to belong. Inside the store, I helped an older woman reach a can off the top shelf. She smiled, thanked me, and we shared a quick laugh about kids these days never offering a hand. I smiled back, happy to be of help. I went about my shopping in peace, humming quietly to myself as I tossed a few items into my basket. That's when I saw him, late teens or early 20s, wearing designer clothes and a smug expression that just screamed entitlement. He was watching me, not just glancing, watching. I ignored it at first, assuming he was just another bored kid. But as I checked out and walked toward my car, he followed. And just as I popped the trunk to load my bags, he stepped in front of me like he had every right to be there. "These yours?" he said, already reaching for my groceries. "Did you even pay for these?" His tone was sarcastic, aggressive. I stood frozen for a second, not out of fear, but disbelief. That's when she showed up. Blonde bob, yoga pants, attitude for days. The full Karen starter pack. She looked me up and down like I was trash on her lawn, then turned to her son and said loud enough for the parking lot to hear, "Call the cops. He tried to rob you." And just like that, everything changed. As I closed the trunk after placing the last bag inside, I felt a sudden tug on my arm. I turned around to see the same guy from inside the store, Karen's son, standing far too, close, gripping the edge of my grocery bag like he had a claim to it. "You seriously think you can just come around here and take whatever you want?" he sneered, his eyes full of arrogance and something darker, hatred. "Don't act like you belong here. Everyone knows people like you don't live in this neighborhood unless you're cleaning someone's house." My blood boiled, but I kept my voice calm. "Let go of my bag." He yanked it from the trunk and dropped it on the pavement, eggs cracking and milk spilling like it was nothing. "I said you didn't pay for this. You probably used some fake card or worse." Before I could respond, his mother stormed over, heels clicking with righteous fury. She didn't ask a single question, just stepped between us and shoved a finger in my face. "You disgusting thief! How dare you touch my son? I saw the whole thing. You assaulted him." My voice caught in my throat. "Ma'am, he just—" "Save it for the police," she snapped, already dialing. Her voice turned sugary sweet as she spoke into the phone. "Yes, hello, officers. There's a black man here threatening my son in the parking lot. He's being aggressive. Please hurry." I stood there in stunned silence, the weight of every assumption, every lie, pressing down on me. Around us, a few neighbors had started to gather. Some filmed, some whispered, no one intervened. And as I looked around at the mess on the ground and the hate in their eyes, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't about groceries. It never was. Within minutes, the sharp wail of sirens pierced the air, growing louder as two patrol cars pulled into the parking lot. Karen practically lit up with excitement, waving her arms to guide them like she was the victim of some brutal crime. "Over here, officers! That's him! He attacked my son and tried to steal from us!" Her voice was trembling with manufactured fear, her eyes darting toward the phone still recording, feeding off the drama like a performer on stage. I stood silently beside my car, arms crossed, heart steady. The first officer stepped out, and I immediately recognized him, Officer Daniels. His eyes locked on mine for a brief second, and I could see it register. He knew who I was. He gave the faintest nod, almost imperceptible, then turned his attention toward Karen, who was still breathlessly explaining the assault. The second officer approached the scene with a more serious tone, but even he paused when he looked at me. I could tell they were both trying to keep their expressions neutral, professional, but the air shifted. Something unspoken passed between us. Karen didn't notice. She was too busy embellishing her son's lies, insisting I had threatened them and looked dangerous. Her son played along, clutching his arm like he'd been injured. "He grabbed me, man. Said I don't belong here," the boy added, voice full of fake bravado. Daniels asked me calmly for my side of the story, and I gave it with no theatrics, just the truth. As I spoke, I could see the tension rising in Karen's face. She expected outrage. She expected handcuffs. But what she got instead was a composed, almost amused silence from the officers. They knew. And while Karen was busy rehearsing her role as the victim, she didn't realize the script was already flipping, and she was the one being watched now. Karen's voice hit a shrill pitch as she pointed at me again, now visibly frustrated, that the officers weren't already dragging me away in handcuffs. "Why are you just standing there? Do your job! Arrest him! He's dangerous!" she barked, her entitled rage boiling over. Officer Daniels looked at me, the faintest smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth, and I nodded. I stepped forward, slowly, calmly, and fixed my gaze on her. "Ma'am," I said, my voice steady but sharp, "I am doing my job. I'm the commanding officer at this precinct." Her face froze. The smug expression melted into confusion, then horror, as the weight of my words sank in. "Wait, what?" she stammered, blinking rapidly. Her son's jaw dropped, his bravado crumbling in an instant. "That's not possible, you're—" He stopped himself, but the unspoken word lingered. Daniels crossed his arms, now clearly done pretending. "Captain has more patience than I would have shown," he said flatly. Karen's face flushed crimson. She tried to recover, muttering something about a misunderstanding, but it was too late. Everyone around her knew, the crowd knew, the camera phones knew, and most importantly, she knew. She had just tried to weaponize the system against the very man who ran it. For a long moment, Karen just stood there, speechless, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't decide whether to beg or defend herself. But the silence was short-lived. Her son, now visibly panicked, tried to brush it all off like it was just a joke. "We didn't mean anything by it," he mumbled, taking a shaky step back. "It was a misunderstanding, right, Mom?" But the tone had shifted completely, and there was no misunderstanding anymore, just accountability waiting to land. I turned to Officer Daniels and gave a nod. "Review all the body cam footage. Check the store's security cameras. I want every word they said on the record." Daniels responded with a crisp, "Yes, sir." And that's when Karen truly started to unravel. "Please," she said, her voice suddenly soft and desperate. "I didn't know who you were. I thought you were someone else. We were just scared." I met her eyes and replied coldly, "You weren't scared. You were comfortable. Comfortable enough to lie, to weaponize your privilege, to try and ruin a life because you didn't like the way I looked in your neighborhood." Her face crumpled as Daniels approached her son. placing him under arrest for attempted theft and disorderly conduct. The boy didn't resist, too stunned to speak, the weight of consequences finally dawning on him. Karen, trembling now, was cited for filing a false police report and warned that further legal action could follow pending investigation. Around us, the once silent crowd had begun to murmur, shifting from quiet observers to uncomfortable witnesses. A few people nodded at me in support. One older man said softly, "About time someone stood up to that woman." I gave no grand speech, no lecture. Just a final glance at Karen as I picked up my spilled groceries, some cracked eggs, a bruised apple, and a shattered milk jug, and said, "You thought calling the cops would fix this, but I am the cops." And with that, I walked away, not because I was angry, but because I'd already won. Justice had spoken, not through violence or shouting, but through calm, unshakable authority. And that's a language people like her never expect to hear from someone like me. As I turned to leave, the air felt lighter somehow, like the weight of what just happened had shifted onto the people who deserved it. I picked up what I could salvage of my groceries, cradling the bag against my chest like it was the last bit of dignity Karen had tried to strip away. Behind me, her voice had gone completely silent. No more yelling, no more accusations, just the quiet hum of reality settling in. As I passed the edge of the crowd, an elderly woman stepped forward, hesitant but sincere. "I just wanted to say," she began, "we're not all like her. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." I paused for a second, looked her in the eye, and nodded. "I know, but thank you for saying it." She gave a small, respectful smile and stepped back. No applause, no dramatic ending, just truth, resting quietly in the space where chaos had tried to take root. I loaded what was left into my car, took one final look at the parking lot, and exhaled. It wasn't about ego. It wasn't about showing power. It was about something deeper. Control, not of others, but of myself. As I pulled out and drove away, I thought about how quickly people judge, how easily some weaponize lies, and how rarely they expect you to rise above it. But that's exactly why I had to, because people like her expect you to fight back loud, messy, and angry. But I've learned that true strength, real power, is quiet, measured, unshakable, and sometimes power isn't about how loud you scream, but how calmly you handle the storm. If you've ever been judged by the way you look, where you're from, or simply because you didn't fit someone else's idea of who belongs, this story is for you. If you've ever stayed calm when you had every right to be angry, stayed respectful when you were disrespected, or held your head high when the world tried to drag you down, then you understand what real strength looks like. This wasn't just a story about groceries or a parking lot argument. It was about standing your ground without losing your dignity. It was about showing that silence isn't weakness, and calm isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the most powerful response there is. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a time you were underestimated, or if you just believe in standing up for what's right, then don't scroll past. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. This channel is about real stories, real strength, and real justice. Let's make sure voices like this are heard, loud, clear, and calm, just like justice should be.